I should have checked my valves first. All right, howdy, good day, everybody. Um, all right. So we have a couple questions. Hello, Cardo. Hello, Braden. Um, we've got a couple questions that we're gonna hit before we get to your questions. Hello, Gabrielle. Gabriel. All right. So the first one we're gonna hit was from my friend in South Africa. And before we answer his question, let me find this real quick. Before we answer, so my friend in South Africa is Leonard Burnt. Brandt. Burnt is my wife's name. um, I want to run by you guys a case scenario of a student that I had. Uh, his name was Connor Stewart. He was one of those highly successful people, successful at everything he did. Aside from playing trumpet, he was a scout. In scouts, he did some amazing things. One of the most remarkable was that he got I think he has like the world record for merit badges or something like that because they had a switch in the merit badges and he had merit badges before the switch, merit badges after the switch. He was also competitive swimmer. I think he was on in the water polo team. Um, Stuff like that, and obviously very successful academically. So, and his father was a pianist, and the father did a very smart thing because the father said to me when he came to the first lesson, he says he knows that if you start wrong, that that can have lasting problems throughout the years. And so he didn't want his son to touch the trumpet or anything until he came to the lesson. So, and I have a sequence that I go through where I always start my beginner students if they've not tried to play the horn already. I always start them on solfeggio, nothing really complex, but we do solfeggio first because we're going to go from solfeggio to the mouth to lip buzz. And if you can't sing up and down, you can't buzz up and down. That's one of the reasons why I have the kids do solfeggio because if they learn to sing and recognize notes going up a scale, then when they get on the buzz, they're not going to have as much problem with that. Now, I don't necessarily do that with every beginner because a lot of times what happens is the beginners come and the reason they're taking lessons is because they tried it themselves and it didn't work. And now they want me to help fix the problems. But this father was very astute and said, let's have the lessons first, and then he can learn to play the trumpet. So I knew the minute that student put the mouthpiece for the mouthpiece placement exercise, I knew then that he was an upstream player because his mouthpiece was like this. And I also knew because the higher notes were easier for him than the lower notes. So his first buzz was, and I'm not gonna imitate the position because I can't do that. His first buzz was up there. And sure enough, the more when we got to the long tones and all that stuff, his first note on the trumpet was a C in the staff. And for his entire trumpet career, he quit trumpet when he got out of high school. But for his entire trumpet career, he struggled with low notes. And so part of the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because upstream players have a instrument position that's pretty much like this. Now, I can't play like that. I have to be pointing down, but the upstream guys have an angle that's like this. Okay, and depending on how upstream you are, the the instrument can be a lot. So this guy, his upstream was so extreme that his nose was almost touching the mouthpiece. That's how extreme he was. Not all upstream players are that extreme. Now let me tell you about the problems he had in junior high. His junior high band director did not know there was such a thing as an upstream player, and it bothered the band director that he wasn't pointing the horn down like everybody else. So he made my student, when he was in band, put his bell down. Okay. Now, in order for a upstream player to put the bell down, they have to close their neck. That's the only way a that's the only way an upstream player can function with the bell that low. They are naturally up here like this. And it took the parents going to him with articles that talked about upstream players. And actually, I think they even threatened him. And I don't know what kind of threats parents can make. Maybe threatening to take him out of band or something. Um, I don't remember the details on that. This was long ago. But yes, it was after the parents went in there and interceded that the student was allowed to put the bell up where it's natural. And then in high school, he didn't have any trouble because they just accepted that his bell was going to be high like that. So why am I talking about this? So when Mr. Brandt sent me this video, he asked me if I can help with the tonguing. But what I'm looking at here is a upstream player. This is a hardcore upstream player. His name is Braden, by the way. And these guys are in South Africa. And oh, hello, Braden. Braden says hello already. And so the first thing, my first recommendation for you, Braden, is, believe it or not, this is going to sound like it's unrelated. It's not unrelated. I'm looking at your left hand, and I don't think it's holding the horn. Right? Now, let me show you what we need from the left hand. We want to hold the hand in a way that the wrist serves as a pivot point. Okay? The horn needs to, so notice that my arm is not moving. It's the horn that's moving. The wrist is bending. I'm not doing this. It's only the wrist that's bending. Now, the guys on this Q and A have seen me do this before. We want to get used to holding the horn this way so that it responds to movement here. Okay, now, once you get used to that, once you get used to holding your horn this way, the next exercise I recommend is putting the horn on your lips and making it go up and down like this. Now remember, I'm not really moving my arm. This is all happening at the wrist, okay? Okay, so that's an exercise you should do a lot just to get used to the mechanics of how, what we're learning there is how to loosen up your grip so that your horn can respond to the angle that your lips need to find that perfect angle. So the question was about tonguing. I don't think you can address tonguing until you address the angle, and the angle is going to be a little difficult if the people around you are not using the same angle. You know, it's not going to come as natural to find the right angle because you have basically what amounts to an opposite setup. So, and let me take a break here, and from what I'm saying, and um, and demonstrate what's different with the upstream players. With downstream players, I'm a downstream player. Most trumpet players are downstream players. Downstream players put the horn down as they go higher and up as they go lower. The upstream players do the opposite. So upstream players, as they go lower, the horn is like that. As they go higher, the horn is like that. Now, I'm over exaggerating these movements. It's not that much movement. And here's something worth understanding. The pivot, we call this a pivot. The pivot changes which lips have pressure, right? So the reason we put the horn up or down is because as we go higher or lower, the lips change position, and the mouthpiece, we want the mouthpiece to be on the lips, same pressure on the top, same pressure on the bottom. If you don't have that right, you can't worry about tonguing. You have to get this right first. So right now, what I recommend for you, first of all, getting used to holding the horn in a way that will respond to your lips. Then practice this in a way that helps focus on the flexibility of the wrist here. And then you can start playing. Now, with the upstream players, you don't want to do, for example, my books don't work for the upstream players as well. Because you don't want your first note to be F or E or anything down there. You want your first note to be like tuning C. And so do some long tones or slow passages going from C down and then back up, C up and then back down. I hope that makes sense. So this is very important um, to help find that natural pivot. And by the way, all of this should be very, very, very slow. Very slow. Now, that's my first recommendation is to find the proper angle. Now, how do you find the proper angle? Because of the sound. When you found the proper angle, the sound rings out. Okay? Now, let's apply tonguing to that concept. Articulation is going to be different for different angles. So, most people who have upstream, the jaw. So for me, I have an overbite. So tonguing is going to be different for me than for somebody who has no overbite. And in fact, some people have, I think it's called an underbite. Some people have their jaw that juts out farther than their top teeth. Okay. So you have to find, I know this isn't going to help much because you have to experiment with this. You have to find what tongue position works for tonguing with that position. So what you have to do is start on just one note and preferably the note that you're most comfortable with. I said C, it could be a different note. It might be a little lower than that, it might be a little higher than that. Your most comfortable note. Take that note. Okay, and move your tongue forward, move your tongue back until you find what works best for you. Now, let me also add this. A lot of times when we're talking about articulation, people forget about the air. The air should be flowing throughout that. So if I just blow through my horn and tongue, we want it to be like that. There should not be changes in the air. We don't want any of that. You can do that musically. When you're trying to learn how to tongue, stay away from that. Musical stuff adds a higher level of complexity to it. All right. So you want the air to continue. And all the tongue does is interrupt the air. Okay? So that's the answer that I have. The most important thing is get your left hand right. And I see you're playing on a cornet. Some cornets are difficult to hold. I'm not sure why you're holding it the way you are, but I could see that the way you're holding the horn could actually be the reason you're having trouble with the articulation. I hope that makes sense. Okay. All right. So the second question, we'll get to you guys in a second. The second question is from Gabriel. He sent the question on the WhatsApp list. And he has an image on here that has two half notes and 16th note signs beneath it, right? 16th note bars, two half notes and 16th note bars. And he wants to know what that is. That's a tremolo. I'll put in the chat. Let me make sure I'm spelling it right. It's tremolo, Tremolo. Okay, tremolo is when you go back and forth between a note. And the value of that note is going to be a half note. So that's 2 beats of G and F sharp. Okay. That's what that is. Short answer for that one. So that's called a tremolo. It doesn't have to be a half step away. It can be any of those, right? Any two notes like that. Okay. So let's get to some of these questions here. Cardo asks a question at the beginning. Hello, Eddie and friends. Hello. I've noticed that when I'm starting to get tired, my song loses focus and gets airy. Is that a normal thing? Yes, sir, that's a normal thing. That's another short answer. Woohoo! Yes, when the muscles get tired, they do not respond the way we're used to, that we're comfortable with. So, and in fact, if you really work yourself out hard, you can expect that to last more than a day. So the next day, when you're doing the smaller routine, you can expect to still have some of that. Okay. So I hope, Braden, that answers your question. Since you're on here, Braden, why don't you ask some follow-up questions? Gabriel says, hello, Eddie and friends. Hello. Javier says, hello, Eddie and friends. Hello. Cardo says, thumbs up, friends. All right. Hello, Jeffrey. Nice to see you. Charles is here. Hello, Charles. Charles is a student of mine. Javier says, my most comfortable position for playing trumpet is with the bell straight forward. What kind of player am I? Just curious. Um, so, I'm not sure. So that whole, you guys have heard me talk about this before. I'm not an expert on the pivot thing. My answer to the whole pivot thing is that we want to be natural with it. The difference with my student Connor and Braden here is that it's just so obvious. It's so extreme that it's become very, very obvious. Okay? So that's, but when it's more subtle, I'm not the guy who really cataloged and categorized all of this stuff is oh no, I can't remember, Reinhardt. Um, so Reinhardt, and I have a friend who was a student of Reinhardt's, and believe it or not, he tells me that what I teach is one of the things that Reinhardt used to teach for one of the kinds of players. So that was very interesting for me. Um, but I'm not. I only read the Reinhardt book one time. It was on my third European trip. And one of the trombone players had the book and let me borrow it on the trip. We were in Montreux at the time, Montreux, Switzerland, and I. It was, you know what, that was my favorite trip, and the reason why is we didn't try to cram all these tours in. We went to Montreux. We stayed in Montreux. I think it was 2 weeks, and so I got to walk the streets, climb the mountain, all this stuff. I had a great time. But yes, while I was there, I also read that book, and that's the only time I read the book. So I have only a perfunctory knowledge of the pivot stuff. My answer to that is this: holding the horn in a flexible manner so that it can accommodate whatever happens here. I don't I don't think it's necessary for us to know what type we are. I think what's necessary is to be able to adjust to whatever the pivot needs to be. Because a lot of us hold the horn with a death grip and don't let it move at all. Okay? And that's just not good. Charles says, I have a strenuous gig on the next day. Should I do a regular day of practice, all the normal routines and music, or a light day? So So, if I understand your question correctly, you're asking, should you practice heavy the day before? And I think that depends on how exposed your part is. Because, like we just talked about with Cardo, if you practice hard enough, you can still have a fuzzy tone the next day. But if you're playing third trumpet part and don't have any solos, um, then that can be, so if it's very exposed, you're playing first part, then I would say cut back a little bit. And you know me, I don't believe in practicing every day anyway. So if you need to take a day off, that's fine too. You know what I think about taking a day off before the performance? There's like a psychological aspect to that. If you take the day off, it's your mentally, it's your way of saying, I've got this. I don't need to cram anything. I'm prepared and I can take it easy right now because I'm ready to go. And there's something very refreshing about having that confidence. Now, I wouldn't be saying that to somebody who doesn't have a muscular embouchure. We talked a little bit about that. Um, Oh no, it wasn't in the. I'm putting out a video tomorrow And I talk a little bit about muscular embouchures in the video that comes out tomorrow. Um, all right, so I hope that answers the question. Cardo says, very appropriate question, Charles. I have a brutal gig this coming Sunday. Yeah, so that's how I say it. Now, let me tell you what I do. This is not to say that you should do it this way. When I'm on a practice roll, I don't let any performances interfere with that. I don't care how important it is. I don't care how exposed it is. I don't care about any of that. When I'm on a roll, what I mean by being on a roll is because always there's reasons to not practice, right? And lately for me, it's I've had a bunch of those times where um, if I have to publish a piece on a schedule, it's got to get done, and there's just no time to practice. So in that context, if I have a big gig, it's not that big of a deal. But when I'm really on it, and right now I happen to be on it, okay. When I'm really on it, I don't change my practice schedule for my performances. I'm not saying you guys should do it that way. I'm at the stage where I am because most of my gigs don't challenge me the way your gigs challenge you. I know that sounds arrogant, but it's just true. I don't have any gigs that push me to my limits because I have a lot of endurance and I have a lot of range. And so I just don't get tired on the gigs. The only gigs I get tired on are the gigs where the PA system is just too loud and I have to overblow. But even that, I've learned how to just use the microphone and just play and not overblow like that. Okay. Javier says, how important is music theory for being a good player? Not talking about reading. I think it is important. No, you know what? Let's put it this way. You know how I talk about the lip buzz, right? I say that lip buzz is beneficial but not necessary. So if there's somebody that doesn't want to do lip buzz, or if there's somebody that can't do lip buzz, or I've had these kind of students too, when they do lip buzz, it stresses them out. Those students shouldn't be doing lip buzz. And it's not necessary to do lip buzz to be a great player. But lip buzz is beneficial. So if you can do lip buzz, you should do lip buzz. If it doesn't stress you out, if it's I hope that makes sense. And the same thing with music theory. You can become a great player without music theory. It's beneficial though. And the more beneficial it is, the more you should probably consider doing it. Right? But it's not a prerequisite. It's not required before you accomplish anything. Okay? Gabriel says, Eddie, a question on Chop's Pro book. Intervals on page 31. Do I rip off that page to use it in the fireplace? Or give up? or do I give up, or do I insist on it? Let me pull the book out and see what you're talking about. I'll be right back. Oh, that's funny. 31. Oh, okay. Yeah, you just keep trying it. Remember how this book works. Okay, remember how the physical trumpet pyramid concept works. And you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, I probably haven't written about this, but I have talked about it in some of the videos. My books work sort of like a obstacle course. basically, and in fact, the way I used to word this is that the routines are an obstacle course for the air. So it's not important that you get the notes. We want to strive for that. We want to push for that. We want to become better at doing that. But it's not important to get the notes. What's important is that you don't sacrifice the air to get the notes. So you could get the notes. Theoretically, you could get the notes right and still do the exercise wrong. We want to have a steady flowing air through that exercise. And that's the whole point of that exercise, is to work on your air, not your articulation. Now this valve, I have a sticky valve on here, so, and I'm not warmed up again. I have students on Friday mornings now, and I don't get a chance to warm up. So this is totally cold. Anyway, I ran out of breath. But you see what I'm doing? I'm making sure that the air is steady through the whole thing. Okay? I hope that makes sense. Um all right. So, all right. So, anyway, any other questions? Let me see. I think I saw a question on WhatsApp. Oh, I already answered it. Okay, that's from Charles. Now let me just double check the website to make sure nothing's come up there. Meanwhile, you guys can ask questions. So I don't see anything on the website. One other place I want to look is to make sure nothing's come up on the comments. Oh, yes, there was from Anthony. Anthony had a question about this process where I rinse the horn and not washing. The rinsing helps me wash the horn less often. Okay. When I rinse the horn, it removes all the fungus from inside the instrument, and now I don't have to do a full cleaning, but once or twice a year, because I do this rinsing. And what I do is I take the mouthpiece out and I put hot water down the bottom. I make sure that my finger is holding the slide so it doesn't pop out. And as the water's coming down, I do this. Now, what I've added to that is I do the spitballs after that, and then I rinse it again. And that makes sure all of the fungus is gone. And so what Anthony wanted to know, here's what he says. Eddie, hi Eddie, you once a while back showed how to clean a trumpet. So technically it's not cleaning the trumpet, I call it rinsing the trumpet. You ran warm water into the bell and through the whole trumpet. My question is, don't the felts on the pistons get wet and out of shape and maybe need to be replaced when you wash a trumpet like that? And the answer to that question is no, unless you have a trumpet that has, what do they call that? when the space between the piston and the valve casing gets too wide and air can get through it, well, if air can get through it, then that probably means that water can get through it. I forget what they call that. It's oh, what's it called? I can't remember. Um, but basically, the valve has to be tight enough. The casing has to be tight enough around the valve so that no air or water can get through. And if your horn is in that kind of shape, the water will never get to the filts. There's another quick answer. Woohoo! All right. Gabriel says, about tuning slide, what note should I use to tune my rotary, please? Uh, Let me tell you what my approach to tuning. So you should still use C, I think. I think C is the best note to tune because the whole horn is built on that note. Um, but let me tell you, because of the nature of the horn, and this is the part that a lot of people just don't understand, and it's because they don't think deeply enough into the subject. They just look at what's on the surface and they'd say, "Oh, that's not right." Okay, I tune the C a tiny bit sharp, just a tiny bit sharp. Now, some people say, when they hear me say that, they say, Eddie tunes sharp. No, I didn't say that. I tune that note a tiny bit sharp. And the reason I do that is because it makes the other notes closer in tune. So the trumpet is a naturally out of tune instrument. There are some notes on the trumpet that are naturally flat. There are some notes on the trumpet that are naturally sharp. It's not like playing a keyboard where everything's distributed evenly. It's not like that. Some notes are sharp, some notes are flat. I tune that C just a tiny bit sharp. And what I mean by a tiny bit, we would say 2 cents. That's the terminology that they use, 2 cents. Two of those little knobs on the tuner. So basically 20%, is that right? That would make sense, right? That's what 2 cents is. So well, this works whether it's C or B. Oh, I see what you're asking. It's our C. It's our C. And I tune a tiny bit sharp so that the other notes are easier to get in tune. So no, I don't play sharp. A lot of people they can't think past that tuning note because they think that the trumpet is tuned like a piano. All right. Cardo says high notes. Why are they so difficult? All right. So, um, my understanding of the high notes goes like this: the the higher you go, the more subtle the movements have to be. The change from in embouchure strength, embouchure firmness, it becomes more subtle as you go higher. The change in tongue arch becomes more subtle as you go higher. The change in jaw position becomes more subtle as you go higher. One way to demonstrate that is if you're playing a slur from low C to G, right? There's a lot of movement. If you do the same perfect fifth from F to super C, there is almost no movement detectable. So part of what makes it so difficult is that it has to be subconscious. We cannot consciously control that. And for that reason, it becomes a feel thing. And now, this complicates issues because so many people think that the high notes are about strength. But if you have enough strength to play a high C, then you have enough strength to play up to super C. A lot of people don't understand that. If you have enough strength to play up to high C, it doesn't require all that much more strength to play the super C. There's a curve, and the curve looks like this. Uh, So, in the beginning, you need more strength. As you go higher, you need less strength, okay, to play higher. It's still going higher, so it's on a curve like that. Um, so yes, so what happens is people think of it as an athletic thing that's the same strength addition, right? The same extra strength that you go from low C to regular C is the same strength that you need to go from C to high C. And that's not how it is. So what happens is they overdo it on the strength side. They muscle up on it. And when you muscle up on it, only two things can happen. You have to either blow a lot more air or the note will just stop. If you over if you if you overdo it on the strength, no, the note will either stop or you have to put way too much air. Okay? So that's why it's hard to play high, because it's not what we think it is. Playing high is not what we think it is. It's not a strength issue. Yes, you need, the way I like to talk about it is there has to be a threshold, right? You have to reach a certain threshold first. And if you, once you reach that threshold, and it's about high C, once you reach that threshold, it all, from that point forward, it's no longer about strength. It's more about this feel. And the only way you're going to get that feel, and you'll read about this in my one range book, the only way you're going to get that feel is to spend time playing up to where you're capable of playing. And that's why my books are set up the way they are. So when you have a range up to high C, you should make your long tones go to high C. You should make your lip slurs go to high C. You should make your scales go to high C. All the exercises you do should go to high C. And your literature should include the notes that are in your range. And the reason for that is to increase that familiarity with those notes. And that way the mental side of it works. Hello, Karen. Nice to see you. You referred to phrasing earlier. Can you give an example? So I teach what I call poetic phrasing. I don't know where I got that. I don't think I made it up, but I have to say I call because most people don't teach this way. So poetic phrasing is when the phrase starts small, starts now, the reason I use the word small instead of soft is because it's more than just volume. Now, a lot of people, when they're talking about phrasing, they limit it to volume. They they say get louder and get softer. There's more to it than just that. So I would rather um, talk in terms of intensity, right? The more intense we start off less intense and we build to a climax with greater intensity. Now, what comes into play with intensity? Tonguing harder or softer, um, a vibrato being more intense, um, uh, pushing the tempo a little bit, and I mean imperceptible amounts. So the way to do all that is to not to try to do those things individually, but to feel the intensity. If you feel the intensity, those things will happen naturally. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example. We're going to start soft. Oh, now I just broke my rule. We'll start small, build to big, and come back down to small again. So I just played 4 phrases, and each one of those phrases started small, built to a climax, and then came back down again. Now, I did it that way to demonstrate. I don't know if you can hear the volume changes um, with this technology, but that's what we mean by phrasing is starting small intensity, building to a climax, and then coming down. Now, there are alternative phrasings. There are times when the phrasing starts high and comes down. There are times when phrasing starts low and comes up and stops. Then there's phrasing that does an inversion where you have high intensity going down to low intensity back to high intensity. That said, those are exceptions. More typically, the phrasing is going to be this poetic phrasing that I'm talking about. Now, what is the phrasing that other people teach? I had a teacher that summarized it this way: you follow the shape of the line. So when it goes higher, you play louder. When it goes lower, you play softer. That's how they teach it. I don't like that. That's not as musical. This poetic phrasing is more powerful. The poetic phrasing is what grabs people by the heart and makes them cry. All right. Gabriel says, you guys are easy to wash your horns. Try to do the same on a rotary. The brushes demonstration you made changed my life for high range. Yeah, so I was tempted to get the brushes out again. I really want to make a video, but I wanted to have the right mathematics, and I haven't finished my research yet. I believe that our range is connected to the golden ratio. So does that make sense? Uh, as you go higher, um, how much more subtle the movements are is based on the golden ratio, right? Just like a snail's shell and stuff like that. So, hello, free LM90. He says, "Hi Eddie, do a video for Trumpet Chop's apprentice book." Um, so, what kind of video are you thinking of? Because I don't know. I think I did, didn't I? Let me look. I guess I didn't. So all I have for the individual books is advertisement. Are you asking to do a video on like how to use the book? I'm not exactly sure what you're. I'm sure you're not saying do a video to advertise the book. I'm sure that's not what you're saying. So let me know if, what it is you're actually asking for. Um, all right. Anyone else got questions? You guys are great. You had lots of questions today. What else you got? You know, I played a gig last night, and you know, when it first started, I was actually kind of sad. And I'm not gonna go into details, Yeah, so the Free says I didn't find the book for Apprentice. There are videos about pro and player version. Yeah, um, those are basically advertisement books, advertisement videos. So I can follow up with that. I can. I didn't know that there wasn't a book for that. I mean, a video for that. So yeah, this gig last night made me kind of sad, and I'm not going to go into details because I don't want to offend anybody. But it made me sad because it made me feel like what I have to offer as a professional musician isn't, and I'm not talking about my playing, by the way. So don't think I'm saying that. Playing wise, it was a great gig. Um, but it just made me feel like nobody appreciates professionalism anymore, and so it was very sad. It was a time. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't even be talking about it. But I'm waiting for you guys to ask questions. Ha. Ha. Gabriel says, "Can you do a classical intro on the next Q and A?" Yes, I can do that. A classic improvised or classic reading something. I hope I remember. I'll probably remember. Ha ha. He says, "You are the maestro, so you choose." Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do a classical one next week. Any other questions? Okay, Karen says, "Do you have a video of you playing through the exercise of the chops books?" No, I don't have that. And if I did, I would never make it public. Oh my. So there is an audio recording that I made for one of my students, and I actually think now that that was probably a mistake because it gives the wrong impression. We're not looking for excellence. We're looking for a steady air. The excellence. And you can say, how do you get excellence if you don't strive for excellence in your routine? Um, that's where the 50% rule comes in. You should be spending 50% of, at least, by the way, not just 50%, but at least 50% of your time striving for excellence in your music. I think it's bizarre that people keep trying to master the routines. That's not what it's about. That's like saying a sports athlete, right? Trying to master push ups, sit ups, pull ups. Now, of course, you want to do proper form, and the equivalent of proper form would be doing the proper air. But stressing over how good these exercises are is not what the exercises are for. I don't play them. And so why do I not publish me playing the exercises? Because they challenge me too, and I'm not 100% on those exercises. The whole point of the exercise is to push me to the limit. So if I don't want to go, I never want to have to go in public and demonstrate my exercises. I know I just played one of them now. I uh, puckered out at the end of it, but um, that's not what. So when you're doing my stuff, you have to change your philosophy. Now remember, the guys who do those other books, a lot of them don't do literature. So they're striving to make the lip slurs perfect. They're striving to make the articulation perfect. I don't care about any of that. I care that your air is correct. So, like for example, if you're doing the last lip slur in the Chops Pro book, I would far rather hear this. I would much rather hear that than to hear someone that doesn't do the air right. Those lip slurs are great for this, right? Because those lip slurs have this like natural mental thing that it does to people and make them stop their air. So when someone who hasn't done my stuff tries to play those lip slurs, they cut the air off to make the change. It almost even sounds like they're tonguing. And I'll ask, did you tongue that? No, they didn't tongue that. But what they're doing is they're cutting it off here. And the reason they're cutting it off there is because that rip between the notes sounds ugly. So I often tell people that to do those exercises properly, it's going to sound bad until you've mastered it. And even after you master it, there's some days, I've been playing those same exercises since the 80s. And there's still some days that for me, they sound terrible. And, I think this causes a problem with some of my students. Because most of my students today are adult students, and the adult students in their past, they would have had lessons with teachers that tell them everything has to be perfect, that it's not good if it's not perfect. And so if they approach my books with that attitude, it's not going to be as beneficial. There's a mental aspect of this that that ruins all the progress. Really. So, that's one of the hardest things for me to teach, because there's like this very narrow path, because I'm not saying that people shouldn't care. Of course you got to care. You have to care that it sounds terrible. You have to care about that. But on the flip side, if you care too much, it ruins the whole thing. So you have to find this this well, how do you fix that? You fix that by focusing on the air. What you should care about mostly, the first priority in your caring needs to be caring that the air is correct. And it, no matter how bad it sounds, if the air was correct, if you had solid air throughout that whole exercise, it doesn't matter how bad it sounds, you got that air correct. That has to be the top priority. Sure, beneath that, as the second priority, you still need to say, well, maybe next time I'll get that better. I'll try to make that better next time. But that's not the main priority. The main priority is getting the best air that you can get. Cardo says, do you practice the day after the gig? Yes, I do. Like I said, I don't let the gig interfere with my practice schedule. Gabriel says, Eddie, one book that I use a lot is band scale expansion studies. What tempo should I aim when practicing it, please? So, there's a reason why my books don't have tempos in them. Uh, you should just play the tempo that is. So, let's say you're on like the fifth one. Uh, About that fast. Slower if you're having trouble with the fingerings. It should not be fast. Remember what the purpose of the expansion studies is. The purpose of expansion studies is to introduce you. Now I know a lot of people are using the expansion studies long after they've been introduced, and they do that almost like a mental warm up. It also works nice as a physical warm up. That's not the same, but even then, it's much better to do slower than it is to do faster. Okay. Free says, I bought Trumpet Chops Pro, and after a week, I can feel benefits for this routine. Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. But I asked about apprentice version because I'm looking for an easier routine when I have gigs and don't want to stress my chops. Well, um, let me tell you about, in fact, maybe I can, no, it's not written out. I have a spreadsheet on my computer where I list all of the traits of the different levels. So the Chops Pro book is up to high C and has all these different things that make it harder. Up to apprentice, the apprentice is up to B flat. So it's only one step away from the pro book, and it's only slightly easier. So what I did in the spreadsheet was look at how many exercises. I looked at how long I want the whole routine to last. That's been another problem lately with my students. It takes them a lot longer to play the routine than what I expected. And I don't understand that entirely. I think some of them are adding more stuff. And, I'm okay with adding more stuff after you've mastered this process. I think sometimes the students are adding more stuff too early. Really, I think. So, so if you want something that you can do on the gig days, I would probably recommend the trumpet player book, the Trumpet Chops Player, because that's going to give you the same exercises, just scaled down, lower range, and fewer exercises. Karen says, when I slow down, the routine takes longer. Yeah, so I understand that. I understand that. Uh, I don't, when I'm talking about the ones that it takes longer, I mean it takes them over twice as long. Over twice as long. I have a student that tells me that it takes 2.5 hours for him to get through the pro routine. And that just shouldn't be. So free LM90, if you're still here, how long does it take you to get through the Chops Pro book? And are you doing the whole book? That's another thing. A lot of people skip, which is not actually, if you're going to skip, you should do the Chops Express book, not the Pro book. But yeah, okay, so Gabriel's doing it right. The Chops Pro book should take about an hour. Now, if you're slowing things down and it adds another 15 minutes, that's not a big deal. But if it's taking you 2.5 hours to get through the routine, um, you know, what bothers me about that is that, and I'm not talking about any individuals. If anybody's watching this that thinks I'm talking about them, please don't. I'm just speaking generally. It it bothers me if you're going to do it that way, where you're adding more stuff um to the routine. Um what bothers me is that now if you're going to say that the routine doesn't work, when you weren't doing the routine, you were bloating it with other stuff. Do you see what I mean? Like for example, the expansion exercises, right? There I have a lot of students that do the expansion. It's not really part of the routine, but they like the expansion, so they add the expansion to the routine. But if you're doing that and you're not getting the results that we expect from the routine, then maybe stop doing the expansion or drop the tonalization studies on the days you're going to do the expansion. But when we bloat it with stuff, and it's not just one student. And like I said, I'm not against anybody doing other exercises besides my stuff. I'm not against that. Um, in fact, I actually recognize that as a sign of maturity for my students when they can now start substituting. Let's say they don't like my lip slurs, they can put other lip slurs in there. I don't care, right? As long as they follow the format that we're talking about, that you're covering your full range, right? But let's take that for example. Let's say you don't like my lip slurs, but you're going to do these other lip slurs instead. And there's a bunch of lip slurs that you're doing that are in the mid register, and this is your high C day. That's a famous lip slur, right? Um, if you're substituting my lip slurs with a bunch of those, then you're not really doing my method. And that's fine. If you don't want to do my method, that's fine. Just don't go around telling people my method doesn't work if you weren't doing my method. Right? Does that make sense? So, and anyway, so I don't know how I got on that. Oh, because we were talking about the finding a routine that's lower in demands. Yes, I would definitely recommend, instead of the apprentice one, the Trumpet Chops player book. Now, when all of the routines are completed, I'm just about to publish the Trumpet Chops master book. When all the routines are completed, we will be publishing all of them in one book and just call it Trumpet Chops. Um, but right now, that looks like it's going to be a while. I didn't know that the master routine would be so hard to write, and I have no reason to believe that the virtuoso routine would be any less difficult to write. So I expected this book to be done 2 or 3 years ago, and it's not working that way. But it's the master book is now complete, and all I'm doing is editing now. I have to write an introduction, and my wife needs to finish the cover. But the master book is just about ready to be released, probably in the next month or 6 weeks, somewhere around that time. So that's exciting. But anyway, so yes, when you slow down, it's okay. We want to slow down. Slowing down is good. Um, we would much rather slow down and have a little bit extra time at the end than to cut the whole route. You know, um, that's not what I meant. Anyway, you guys get the idea. I'm very, very tired. I don't know if you can tell. Last time I told you guys I was tired, I went back and watched the video. I didn't seem as tired as I felt. So, and I think it was the same thing as today, right? Um, I don't normally tell people about this, but I'm on a 5-day fast, and this is the 5th day of those 5 days. In fact, this fast is going to end up being uh, just short of 6 days because my wife has to work early in the morning, and we're not going to eat until she gets back off work. So I won't be eating. The last meal I had was on Sunday. I won't be eating again until tomorrow afternoon. So that's just short of 6 days of not eating. So sometimes when I'm fasting like this, uh, I start to feel like I'm not making any sense. But like I said, I watched the video. It wasn't as bad as I thought. Any other questions? You guys had great questions. Oh, we're over time. I haven't been looking at the time. We can blame the fasting on that. All right. If there's any questions, we can maybe fit one or two in, short ones. Otherwise, we'll shut down and get ready for the weekend. Gabriel says, "Thanks for everything, Eddie. Have a nice weekend. Goodbye, all friends. See you next week." Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Nice to see you guys. Always nice to hang out with you guys. Javier, Jeffrey, nice to see all you guys. Okay. All right. God bless you guys. We will see you next time, probably next week again. Free says, "I think I'm going to buy Trumpet Chops player for my students." Oh, that sounds good. All right. Bye. And we'll see you guys next time. God bless you. Have a great weekend.